Well, I want to welcome everybody today. Thank you for joining us here in our Texas APSE Employment First question and answer event. We're going to go through a couple of quick slides, some housekeeping here. This is our flyer that we shared with everybody. We welcome you. Thank you for coming and joining us. I'm sure we'll have a few more jump in shortly. We'll continue to let folks in as we get through this kind of upfront piece. Brittany, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So we are going to be talking about Employment First in Texas. This is part of National Disability Employment Awareness Month as we celebrate together. Most of us here work in an industry where we're supporting folks, whether it's through advocacy, direct service, training, any number of ways. And we're here to celebrate and be excited about our Employment First initiative in the nation and here in Texas in particular. Brittany, if you don't mind moving to the next slide.
Oh man, there we go.
So excuse us as we have any little hiccups as we go through the day. We know how that goes. It's 4 o'clock on a Monday of all things. But today's agenda, just saying welcome. We're going to get to some housekeeping in just a second. We're going to talk about Employment First here in Texas. Brittany's going to give us a quick overview and some information. Then we're going to have a panel and some open question and answer time. So please join in. Think about those questions as we're talking. And then at the end, we'll do a quick summary and a call to action. Next slide, please. So again, this is part of our National Disability Employment Awareness Month celebration that we're doing as Texas APSE. Today, I'd like to welcome Liana Davis, who is providing interpreter services. She is one of our at-large Texas APSE members. Beth Palmer is our communications chair. She's here today. Ronnie Jo Frazier, who's our professional development co-chair. Myself, Lucy Gafford, also the professional development co-chair. Lauren Gerkin, who's our policy chair, Dr. James Williams, our treasurer, and Brittany Miles, who is our president. She's going to take over in just a second. Just want to remind everybody, we've been doing Zoom for what, like 18 months now. Please stay muted or raise your hand so that we can call on you while we're doing the presentation, or type your questions in the chat box. We'll be monitoring that as well. So everybody knows we will send out a survey afterwards via email, but we'll also put a survey, we'll put the same survey in the chat box. Regardless, as long as you fill out that survey, we will make sure that you get your CEUs. If you do not complete the survey, you won't get any CEUs. So make sure you do that to get your employment service credentials, CEUs. This is free, guys. You can get CRC, CEUs, and LPC. So please just let us know by answering that survey what you need. So I do want to welcome again Brittany Miles, our president of Texas APSE. She's going to take over and keep us entertained for the next few minutes. Take it away, Britt.
That is a tall order, but thank you so much, Lucy, for that introduction. I am really excited to be here. I'm excited for everyone who has joined us today to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is employment first in the state of Texas. And I have the privilege of being the president of Texas APSE. And if you don't know Texas APSE, we are a nonprofit. We have about 80 members strong, and we consist of a board with 5 different committees that you can be a part of. And we've done some excellent work. And later on, if you stick on, we have a wonderful thing to celebrate. We've only been in existence for a year. And in fact, it's been a year and 2 days. So I'm really excited. It's our first birthday, and I'm just a proud parent to celebrate our first birthday. But it took a while. We've been trying to get it going for the last 2.5 years. And then previously, Texas APSE about 8 years ago, trying to get off the ground. But I'm really happy to say that not only are we off the ground, but we're one of the strongest state chapters. We've actually seen some wonderful employment first wins, which that's what we're going to talk about before we get to our amazing panel, so that we can really start off with a celebration, because that's why we're here. It's National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and Texas is in fact an employment first state where we believe, I'll go to the next slide, it is the policy of the state that earning a living wage through competitive employment in the general workforce is the priority and preferred outcome for working age individuals with disabilities who receive public benefits. Yay, Texas. So it's been 8 years since we've passed that policy, and now it's our mission at Texas APSE to keep advancing employment first initiatives across the state. So let's talk about the wins so far. So like I just read, our policy in 2013 was established in the state of Texas. And although, we still have a lot of room for improvement, we're one of the states that has an employment first policy, where there are other states that do not have an employment first policy. So we could just be happy that we're in this state. And then our next employment first win is in 2014, the passage of WIOA, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which was a federal policy that was mandated. And what that did for employment first nationwide, and specifically in Texas, is two major things. One is it gave a lot more funding. There was already existing funding, but funding dedicated to transition students. So students from 14 to 26 is actually what the legislation says, but are in their journey graduating from high school and looking for a job. And that it's not just for people that it's for all people. So the important point of WIOA is that it's competitive integrated employment for all individuals with disabilities. So even the most significant people with disabilities. And that's the other second piece of WIOA that's so helpful in advancing employment first, is that it establishes the definition of competitive integrated employment. And what that means is that people with anyone, especially people with significant disabilities, deserve a job in the community with peers and working for minimum or above minimum wage. And then in 2022, which is a pat on our own back, we have one of our panelists today can speak to this because she's basically the reason it was passed in Texas, but SB 50 was passed just this past session. And what that's meant to do, and that's a Texas specific policy, is it's supposed to help Medicaid waiver recipients across the state of Texas have better access to employment programming. So currently only 2 to 4% of people with Medicaid waiver are accessing employment services. And the Medicaid waiver is intended to be the long-term support mechanism for job coaching, job stabilization, job ongoing support nationwide, but specifically also in Texas. And people aren't accessing it. And so of course our employment numbers aren't where they should be for people with IDD. Our next win is currently happening. So we just celebrated at the beginning of this year, October 1st, Texas Workforce Commission, based on a white paper that we wrote and some wonderful meetings and some provider advocacy from across the state, raised employment service rates, and they hadn't been raised in, I think, 15 years. So yeah, was it 10? James gave me a little signal. 10 years, hadn't been raised in 10 years. So what that means is that, people with disabilities weren't getting the supports that they needed, and they were staying stagnant and not either getting careers or, getting careers that really matched their skill sets. And so what we're hoping to see is, while the provider capacity across the state has drastically dwindled since COVID, but even before that, it was really struggling, is that we didn't have availability of services in all regions of the state. And hopefully this rate increase will help build provider capacity so that all Texans with disabilities can get employment services. And currently Texas Workforce Commission is the largest employment services agency in the state of Texas. So we're real excited, and those conversations continue. In fact, on Wednesday, we're meeting with the head of TWC to help advance employment first. So real excited about not only what Employment First has done in Texas, but specifically what APSE has helped generate in terms of momentum to advance Employment First in the recent years. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here, because now we're going to get into the fun stuff while you're all here. is we have some wonderful panelists from across the state that are here. They're subject matter experts in employment first. I am so lucky to call them friends of mine because they also serve on the board. So I'm going to start with just some introductions so that you understand what a privilege it is to be here today and listen to what they have to say. So first, I'm going to start off with Dr. James Williams. James has been in the service for over 15 years in vocational services, evaluations, high school transition programming, and training for individuals with disabilities, particularly those on the autism spectrum disorder. He's a certified rehabilitation counselor. He has an advanced certified autism specialist, and he's a certified special education teacher. James has a bachelor's in special education from Sam Houston State University. His master's is in rehabilitation counseling from Texas Tech University Health Science Center, and his doctorate of education in educational leadership is from Lamar University. So he is Texas born and bred, and he's definitely someone that I personally have reached out to be a subject matter expert and sometimes a shoulder to cry on. So we're really privileged to hear him today. He uses his professional and personal experience with ASD as a catalyst to inspire and educate others to believe in the incredible possibilities for adults and children with disabilities when they receive appropriate support and accommodation. So thanks, James. We're going to move on to our next wonderful panelist. Sorry, I keep adding slides instead of just going to the next slide. Next is Ashley Ford. Ashley is the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at the ARC of Texas. Ashley oversees public policy and advocacy activities and supports policies that improve the quality of life for Texans with IDD, and specializes in policy affecting community services and support and competitive integrated employment. Prior to her role at the ARC of Texas, Ashley worked at the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities in roles impacting public policy, communications, and grant initiatives. As their public policy and communications specialist, Ashley specializes in policy affecting higher education, sexual assault, and access to competitive integrated employment for Texans with IDD. And I'm sure everyone on here knows what IDD stands for, but just in case, we've said it a few times, we're really bad at jargon and I need to get better at it. It's intellectual developmental disabilities. She also worked closely on the origination of many TCD grants, project ideas before joining TCDD. TCDD stands for Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities. She served as legislative intern for Texas State Representative John Zerwas, not a native Texan, hopefully I said that right, and her hometown is Paris, Texas. In addition to Texas APSE, Ashley sits on the Advocacy Council on Post-Secondary Education for Persons with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities of Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. Whew. I am so sorry, Liana. I'm sure I'm going way too fast for your interpreting. I'm going to slow down. All right, next we have Lauren Gerkin. Lauren Gerkin is proud to be the point person for employment-related policy at TCDD. Since her time as a policy fellow at the ARC of Texas, Lauren has been committed to expanding competitive integrated employment opportunities for Texans with disabilities. In addition to her work at TCDD, Lauren sits on the board of directors for the Texas chapter of the Association of People Supporting Employment First, APSE, where she serves as their public policy committee chair. Thank you so much for all of you to be here today. And I think we should just get started. So let's go ahead and go to our first question. Yeah. Employment first. What does employment first mean to you, and what has been the most important advancement in the employment first movement? I think we'll start with Lauren. Can we start with you?
Sure. Thank you, Brittany. Hello, everybody. So really quickly, I want to acknowledge I do have a speech impediment. So if you're looking at the closed captioning, you may want to look at the interpreter for now. I think Liana may understand me a little bit better than the computer. So I am so happy to be here, and employment first. To me, it's a philosophy that inspires actual action and change. Employment first is a policy, but it's also a mindset that we're trying to get people into. We're trying to shift the idea that people with disabilities can't work and they can only live off certain government benefits, to really open your minds and say, okay, if we are creative and if we are determined and if we believe that people with disabilities can and should work, then we can make some really creative things happen that get people employment. I don't know if there's one major advancement that has happened. I think, even the adoption of employment first policy in the intended show to be in step. We've had a few legislative wins. Like Brittany said, we had Senate Bill 50 by Senator Zaffini, which is going to help people who have Medicaid waivers access employment support better. We also have last session in Senate Bill 753 by Senator Zaffini that just made it illegal to pay some minimum wage, some below minimum wage, and the purchasing from people with disabilities program. We're just gonna offer people a better opportunity to learn to earn equal wages set to their peers. So we've had a lot going on, and I think that the reestablishment of APSE in Texas is a huge win as well. I came in after it was reestablished. I want to thank everybody who worked on that. We've made some significant strides, and I'll just wrap this question up by saying I have seen that people at the legislature shift their perspectives, which in my opinion may be the biggest one of all. And seeing people who thought for years that people with disabilities can't work begin to see, okay, maybe they can, and maybe we should be working to make that more accessible for people, which is huge.
Thank you so much, Lauren. James or Ashley, I'll open this question up to you.
So employment first to me means dignity. It means social integration and inclusion. Participating in work is really the crux of people's, fitting into the community and having a sense of community. And so, we find that when people are able to participate in work, it decreases feelings of social isolation, and it also increases their personal autonomy. So they're able to be more independent and full participation. And so that's what employment first means to me. It has less to do with public benefits and employment services and all of that. It is employment first is sort of this mentality that if you have employment first, so many things in life start to fit together. You have improved mental health. You are less involved in the criminal legal system. So many of these things work together. And I think the most important advancement in the employment first movement has really been this recognition that, maybe rather than spending your whole day in rehabilitation 5 days a week, you can actually try to work or gain some employment skills. I think that recognizing that employment services and supports are in the Medicaid waiver and should be is a really great advancement.
Thank you, Ashley. What you just talked about reminds me of, a quote that I often refer to in trainings that I provide. And it's basically, if you're at a party and you're just getting to know someone, you never met anyone before, oftentimes the first question that you're asked is, what do you do? And giving someone the ability to say, oh, I work at Walgreens or I work at JP Morgan Chase, that really gives them a sense of identity. And I think, people often with IDD don't have that purpose, right? That they're looking for. And maybe they do have that purpose, but that purpose isn't up to snuff in terms of what society deems as something that's worthwhile or equal, right? Well, when you get paid, a paycheck, just like Joe, your coworker who doesn't have a disability, that's a social justice movement. That's equality. So thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of the dignity of risk, right? The principle of dignity of risk. If you're able to take that risk in order to go out into a community that may not be a safe bubble for you, but what that provides you in terms of feeling of accepted and being able to access services just like anyone else, specifically employment, like that brings about equality and dignity. So thank you so much, Ashley. James, you're up.
Oh, I don't know how you're gonna make me follow those two really good answers. No, I mean, I agree. I think, one of the things that I think about employment first is I very much tie it as a CRC, a certified rehabilitation counselor, to informed choice. The idea that, a person with a disability in all the services they get, and frankly, not just the services, where they live, who they associate with, their school, everything, should have the right to informed choice. And it means just what it says, information to make a choice. And so I think that's a big part of it. And I think employment first and informed choice really go really well together, because a lot of times what we see professionally is a lot of individuals with disabilities that choose a non-employment path, not because that's necessarily what they want or what they aspire to, it's because it's what's presented to them. It's what's offered to them. And so they take what is offered to them, and who wouldn't, right? So I think the idea that employment first, if we can change that paradigm and really shift it to where we're looking at, as it says, employment first, and we're making that one of those, informed choice options when an individual is designing, whether it's a life care plan or an IPE or whatever they're doing. I think that's super, super important and really will allow individuals to do that. And I think, probably I'm gonna echo what Ashley said, and Lauren, the most important thing that I see in Texas is that we finally have not just everyone on here thinking those things, because we can all talk to each other all day, and we do. And we're all in agreement. We're the choir. We don't need to preach to each other. What we really need, and we're not all the way there, but we're getting there. What we really need is at the legislative level, and I would even argue even higher than that, at the federal level as well. That understanding that, again, people with disabilities can work. They should have that as an option. And not only should that be a option, it should really be the first option. And I think that's a true shift. And as Brittany, as you said, we've got some work to do, but the fact that we have a policy, the fact that we've really done part of the work already, which is put the policy in place, now is the exciting part. Now is the time when we get to say, okay, we've got a policy. Now let's build this robust provider network to actually enact the policy with customers, with individuals with disabilities, actually help them achieve those things. And APSE is a big driver of that. And so we've got work to do, but we've already made a great start.
Amen. Thank you so much, James. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next question, which is geared towards you again, James. And we're thinking of Employment Services 101. We know a lot of people on this presentation today, this celebration today, are employment services providers, because they came for their 3 CEUs, and we're just so excited that you're here. And you get to learn from subject matter experts. And James Williams is one of the best. And so James, being in the field for so long and understanding Texas is sometimes a messy system to figure out and get to know the ropes and really succeed. I'd love to hear your perspective and specifically how do the pieces all fit together?
Sure. So I think one of the first things to explain is there really are two dominant systems of public services for people with disabilities in Texas to get a job. And just so you know, Texas is not unique. Most states it's like that as well. And those two dominant systems are our Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, or VR. In Texas, it's called the really long name that I'm not going to pronounce, basically TWSVRS, but Texas Workforce Commission, it's all the same thing. It's just a complicated name. So that's our VR agency, and they provide services. And then we have Medicaid employment services as well. In Texas, most people know the VR side of things, and they know they do that, but a lot of people don't even know that that Medicaid waiver provides employment services in Texas. In fact, I've talked to several colleagues and even service coordinators, people that actually write plans for people with disabilities in Texas, don't know that they could put in the plan employment services, and it has a number and a billing code and a name, and which is, I think it's kind of funny, but it's not funny. It needs to be addressed, but it just shows that we get it. There's a lot of confusion. So that's my goal today, is just to clear it up as quickly as I can. So again, we've got these two systems, right? Well, we'll start with the VR side, and then we'll move to the Medicaid side. So with the VR side, there are a lot of different services that Texas Workforce Solutions, TWSVRS, Texas Workforce Commission can provide. And one of those is, of course, supported employment and job placement services, where we're actually helping a person with a disability get a job. So that's a service that they can fund, and in many cases do, across the state of Texas. Now, we alluded earlier, you have to have a provider that can do those services of quality, which that is something that APSE is advocating and trying to address and make better with the agency. But that said, if that provider's there, that's one really great service that individuals with disabilities can access. Other services, though, revolve around evaluation. Let's say you don't know if you want to get a job. You don't know if you can work. You don't know what you want to do. You don't know where you want to do it. Totally reasonable. They also offer a lot of different services: environmental work assessment, supported employment assessment, I'm trying to think, vocational evaluations. There's lots of assessment tools that could be done as well to just give some information, to provide that informed choice to an individual, their family, their case manager, with that information to figure out what a good service or what a good pathway would be. And then the one that I want to talk about, because I think a lot of people don't even know it exists either, although it's getting better, is things like pre-employment training services or vocational adjustment training services. These are things that don't involve actually getting a job. They involve getting training to get a job. And what's really cool about that is many of those services can be done on individuals as young as 14 years old. So even if somebody is very young, has no clue what they want to do for a job, because I don't know about y'all, 14, I really didn't know yet. So no clue what they want to do. They can start getting training to get ready for that without even going through the placement process. And that's also a service that can be provided under VR, and it's part of WIOA. There's lots and lots of resources, financial resources for the state to provide really incredible services in that area. The company I work for, we do a lot of them across 3 states, and they're awesome services. It's super, super helpful. And again, we can work with 14-year-olds, so you can really start early. It's an awesome, awesome thing, especially to foster employment first. So those are just the quick examples. I could go on and on. There's lots of different services, but those are the primary ones, things related to placement, evaluations, and training. Okay, so if I can put them in 3 buckets, those are the 3 buckets I usually organize them as. Again, all those can be provided by VR. Another myth that I want to crush really quick that VR tries to crush lately too is that VR only helps individuals that are higher functioning. That's not true at all. They actually legislatively have to work with a wide range of disability. And I'll be honest, in past years, it was a little harder. It's not really as much anymore. A lot of the individuals we work with through the agency are individuals with intellectual disabilities, some more significant than others, but totally employable, and there's lots of services they can offer. So definitely don't allow that to dissuade you if you're a person with a disability or even your provider and weren't sure on that. I'll break that myth now. It is not true. So that's the VR side of things. Summing up as quickly as I can. With those services, the access point is pretty easy. We're really excited about this. This is a huge deal, but if you go on TWC's website now, yes, they have a website. That's first of all, mind blowing, right? They have a website, and you go to the website, they actually have a self-referral link on that website now, which is so awesome. And you can even start the process there. So if you have a customer or you yourself have a disability or your family member that has a disability that wants to talk to them, you don't have to call 16 numbers and try to get a hold of somebody, because believe me, I know that's not fun. go to the website, fill out the form, and then an intake person contacts you, and you can follow the process with a tracking number throughout the way. So that's a great access point to get started with those services, and then they can go from there. Ronnie Joe, our associate, put it a link in the chat if you'd like that link. It's super, super helpful. One of the best things they've ever done as an agency. So that's the VR side. Real quick, the Medicaid waiver side, lots of different services as well, employment services, job placement services. Again, you have to ask for them. They have to be in your plan. Just like with VR, you have to have it in your plan. You have to ask your service coordinator to put that in your plan if you're a person with a disability getting those Medicaid waiver services. You have to know those services exist, which thanks to today's webinar, you now do. And you have to have a provider that can do those services. And I will tell you, that's also something that we're working on. There are not enough in Texas. There are not enough Medicaid waiver employment service providers. In fact, we've gotten stats before. It's very, very small. It's like a small handful of people. I only know like 5 or 6 off the top of my head. Where we're one of them, and we have a new contract. So that tells you.
James,
but it's
can I just
service.
add something
Sure.
to that, like for context? I think
Sure.
it's helpful if people understand too that these employment services and the Medicaid waivers weren't in there until
Correct.
2013. When
Correct.
we passed the employment first policy and law. So I think that's like helpful for context, is why we're so like forward with VR versus not with Medicaid. So
Yes, and they're catching up, and we will catch up. We all on this board have faith that we will catch up. But yes, that's true. It is still a new thing, but it is a thing. So please know it is a thing. So finding that provider, and honestly, if you don't know who a provider is, or if you have a problem finding somebody, honestly, you've got our contact information. Reach out to us, and we'll look at our Rolodex and we'll see if we can get you to somebody. But that's another great avenue to get services. What I will also tell you, this is going to blow some minds. My apologies. You can connect them together. Yes, I know. Fireworks are going off. You can, and in fact, we have a customer we work with in our agency who did just that. He actually had employment services through Texas Workforce Commission. TWC helped him, as a provider, helped him get a job. We placed him, job coaching, get him settled. Well, he needed long-term support. Well, that's what Medicaid waiver services are for. So he was able to work with his Medicaid waiver service coordinator and another provider to provide long-term job coaching and support under his waiver services. It worked beautifully, beautifully, beautifully. He was a young man with Down syndrome. Beautifully, beautifully done. And again, they just connected the two pieces. And honestly, the only reason that happened is his mom asked a question and said, "Can I connect the two pieces?" And his service coordinator did some research and found out, yes, we can, let's do it. So again, just ask, but they can be connected as well. And honestly, just as for me personally, I would love to see that happen thousands of more times, because that's what really needs to happen to help individuals with significant disabilities go to work. VR alone is just not going to cut it. It's too short term. They have to access long-term services. So if we can make that connection, we really can change those numbers, I feel like, in Texas easily.
Absolutely.
So,
and James,
yeah.
I'm gonna squash another myth, because you're squashing
Yeah.
myths. I think I want to get on that.
Please
game
do.
Too. So supported employment is meant to be the program that someone who has a Medicaid waiver and wants to go to work, they go to VR, they go to supported employment first, right? Well, one of two things can happen. You can be in a supported employment plan, get a job, get to stability, and then the long-term services portion kicks in with the Medicaid waiver. One of those myths is I have my case closed with VR before I can access my Medicaid waiver services. That's not true. They're actually meant to go together. Isn't that amazing? Now, the other thing that can happen is you could be denied from VR, which sadly happens, and Texas APSE is working really hard to get the belief that everyone can work and can benefit from VR services. But if that happens, I want everyone on this call to know that if they're a Medicaid waiver recipient, they can still access employment services. And we don't want people to be discouraged because VR, didn't open a case for them or close their case because they couldn't work. That's the end all be all, right? They can actually they can open what's called employment assistance through their Medicaid waiver, add that to their plan, and they can get that discovery piece, which is all the things we need to figure out to do a real good job placement, whether that's customized employment, task bundling, understanding behavioral needs. All those things can happen through the Medicaid waiver before someone goes to work. So I just wanted to bust a myth Ashley, did you have anything you wanted to add? Because I know you've done a lot of advocacy with Medicaid.
No, I think that it's super important just to highlight here that if people want to access employment services through their waiver, they have to add it to their plan. And you can do that at any point. You don't have to wait till it's like your annual renewal time. I mean, you can do it at any point. So we know that in the past, like only 3% of Texas waiver participants had employment listed on their plan. This is like that 3% number is from a few years ago, so it probably hasn't changed that much. And so
Probably gotten worse with COVID.
Yeah. So, oh gosh. And so I just want to say, like, we only have 3% of people with on that on their plans right now. You can change your plan at any time, and you need to get it on your plan if you want it. So
Great. I'm going to move us along because I see that we're getting close to the 4:40 hour. So another fun question, and I'll start with you, Lauren. Success stories. What are some Texas Employment First success stories that you know of?
Yeah, and so I'm not going to use names because I don't have permission from them. But there's an individual living in the Houston area who grew up and had very active parents who wanted him to work. And as he was looking at transition from high school out into adult life, they did some really good conversations with him to find out what he was interested in doing and what he could do. And he expressed what his interests were, and instead of looking at him and saying, oh well, there's not a job out there that you can do that meets what you want. The transition coordinators and his parents and his teachers and everybody had this idea of, okay, what if you open your own business? And they worked with him to develop the skills that he would need to do the job that he wanted to do. And they reached out to TWC and said that he wanted to start his own business. Here's what we need to do that. We need a van that he can transport himself and his technology. We need some loans to get us going. And he now has an insurance and federal starting business in the area. And not only does he have a job what he's doing what he wanted to do, but he hires like a dozen other people with disabilities who have been denied from different services as well. And I know quite a few people who have really done well in starting their own business. And the only reason I'm focusing on that is because I don't think people understand that that's an option that people have. Where if you're a person with a disability and your skills and talents don't necessarily meet a set job that already exists, or if you have a more complicated schedule where you have therapies and doctor's appointments during the day, where you can't necessarily work a 9-to-5 job, it's a really great option to be able to set your own schedule and your own income and all these things. And it has great and some determination, right? So I hope that people can explore that as an option if you are a provider or you do work with TWC. Have that in your
Great.
pocket.
Yeah, a lot of people don't think of self-employment services, and TWC does offer self-employment services. So thank you. They're success stories are few and far between. So thanks for sharing those, Lauren. James, did you have a success story you wanted to share as well?
Sure, real briefly. So we've done our company's done employment services for about 15 years now in Central Texas, and we have a lot of examples, but there's one in particular that still stands out for me, and I share it frequently because I have his permission, not with his name, but just to share his story. So basically, we had an individual who was high functioning on the autism spectrum, transition age individual, who had completed an associate's degree. And realized pretty quickly that his associate's degree, although it was really fun, was not going to get him a job in that field. I won't tell you what degree, but you could guess, make some guesses. But he's a wonderful individual, very kind, very nice, very capable, very smart, very high functioning on the spectrum. Had some social skills challenges, had some quirky behavior, but honestly, totally employable. And so this individual was working with another provider for a while and could not find him a good fit. They could not get an employer to give him an opportunity. And so the provider or the counselor talked with us and asked if we would take his case and basically take a shot and see if we could help him reach his goal. So we did. One of our really great case managers, have met many, but one in particular that worked with the student. And one of the things that was interesting is he went on a couple of interviews and just not the right fit, but finally, he made a connection with a particular hiring manager at a Home Depot. And if you're not aware, Home Depot is actually, Lowe's is very good about it as well. Very disability friendly in terms of hiring. They will give a person with disability a shot. If you can do the job, they will pay you a more than fair wage and they will give you a chance. And so, which is great. And so they did. They gave him an opportunity. The individual, actually, his manager, his boss, had a younger son with autism. I think he was 6 years old. Really wanted to support people on the spectrum. Really believed in this individual and gave him a great opportunity. So after 4 years, he had his first job. It wasn't anything fancy because he didn't want anything fancy. He actually he loved plants and he loved working outside. So he actually wanted to work in the garden center. So that's what he did. And so he worked some in the garden center. But then one day they asked him to help with carts. And that's where it was really interesting. So he did help with carts. What was ironic was that he was actually so good at helping with carts that the other employee they had assigned who did not have a disability was really no longer needed because he worked at twice the pace of that individual and did a really good job, and actually was basically amazing for what his manager said. That was his words, amazing at the quality of work that he did. He was so eager to do the work, showed up every day on time, smile on his face, interacted with customers, and really put forth his effort. Well, the amazing story about this individual is not only did he have a job, but within 1 month of working with that employer, he actually received the Homer Award, which was basically an Employee of the Month equivalent at a Home Depot. And he was the first individual with a disability at the store that received that award. And in fact, they ended up, this is kind of a funny story, they ended up reassigning that neurotypical individual to another department because he was no longer needed. And this individual, this young man, was able to do the job of 2 people out in the Texas heat in the middle of July. So he's an incredible individual. In fact, since that time, he's gotten, I think, 2 raises and a promotion, and he's still employed to this day. And that story that started about 4 years ago. So really incredible opportunity. And again, I think why I wanted to share it is because it's all what about NDEAM is about. It's about opportunity. People can't show you what they can do if they never have the opportunity. And a lot of people with disabilities are never given the opportunity. It's not an ability issue, it's the opportunity. So when he was given an opportunity by somebody who believed him, who was set up for success with a good provider and a good support system, he was successful. And I hope y'all know he is not the only one, and he certainly doesn't need to be the last one.
Amen. Yeah, oh, and we're getting claps. Okay, yeah.
Not for him, not for me. I'm just sharing the story.
Oh, absolutely.
It was him.
No, for him. Absolutely. So actually, I didn't mean to go. We have one more stock question before our wonderful Q&A. And this one's directed at Lauren. Lauren, disability benefits are the #1 reason people hesitate to work. How have you seen people overcome this challenge?
Yeah, I think that I will try and be quick. I know it's a complex conversation. So anyone who wants to continue offline, I'm happy to talk about benefits. Yeah, and so a lot of people are worried that if they work, they will automatically lose their benefits, like supplemental security income, social security, disability insurance, Medicaid, and Medicare. in Kansas, the reason that it's so prevalent is Social Security is linked with Medicaid. So in order to get Medicaid services, usually you have to be eligible for supplemental security income. So if you meet the income limits for that, you will lose your waiver. But there are ways, there are so many work incentives. And if you look up Social Security Administration work incentives for SSI, a plethora of them come up, and you just have to find out what's the best fit for you, and what applies for you. For example, if you are under the age of 22 and you're a student, there's an income limit waiver, right, where you can earn a different amount than if you weren't a student. So as one example of many, I have given hour-long presentations on that, so I'm clearing the 5 minutes. But the biggest thing is if you're a provider, if you're a parent, if you're somebody with a disability, please know that you can work with your benefits, and you can work your way off of your benefits as well if you want to. And the biggest message is, I'm sorry something about it in the chat, but if you are worried about losing your benefits in terms of losing your Medicaid waiver, you can do something called a Medicaid buy-in, which the best way I can explain it to people who are living and breathing Medicaid and benefits like we all do, it's a bit like insurance, where you put money in and you keep all these benefits that you will get with Medicaid. And each Medicaid waiver has slightly different rules, and I encourage you to look into whatever waiver you're talking about and making sure. But generally speaking, it's either you can work and earn within that income limit and keep your benefit, because as you work, Social Security will adjust what you receive and it will match up, or you eventually work your way off and you can buy your Medicaid. The biggest, most important bit of information that you need to know when you're working with benefits is you must report your income. And I encourage you more to report it at least 2 different ways. Right? You can report it on the phone, and you can send in your pay stubs. And make sure that you keep track of yourself doing that. And so that if something happens, you have the paper trail to back it up. And then second thing is, if you work and you receive any kind of benefit from Social Security, they are overwhelmed and they are backed up, and it will take a while for your work to go into their system, and they will continue to send you money. Don't spend that money. Put that money away, save it, because they will come back and they will ask for it. And while you can ask for a waiver to not have to pay that off, it is difficult to be improved. So if you're working and you're getting more money than you should, and you know that, please, please, please put that money away so that you don't end up indebted to Social Security later on. And that is something that they will not tell you, that everybody needs to know.
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I've known a couple of individuals that have been in back payment status with the IRA or with Medicaid. So thank you so much for for sharing your tips and tricks there. I also put in the chat a couple of the names of the work incentives. So if people want to Google them or read the Social Security Red Book because they need something to fall asleep to at night, they can absolutely do that. But I think we're at our like really exciting time where if there are people that came and had some burning questions, they can take themselves off mute, use the raise their hand feature, all the things we talked about in our housekeeping for an open Q&A. And if there is a hand up, Ronnie Joe, would you help me? Actually, I can see everyone now. There we go. I don't see any hands up. Okay, well then I will just open it up to, oh, we got a hand up. We got Rachel. Rachel, feel free to go off mute or put your question in. Oh, she's off mute. Go ahead.
Hi, so Dr. Williams, you mentioned that there's not a whole lot of folks that offer employment assistance through like in the HCS program or like the Medicaid waiver programs. Mm-hmm. Is that a situation where that's contracted directly through the service provider like other services would be?
It's a little tricky. That's a great question. And actually, we just went through this process. So in order to do services through Medicaid waiver, like employment assistance, usually with rare exceptions, you have to get basically a traditional HCS or class contract with, and you do that directly with the HHSC, Health and Human Services Commission. I will warn you, being as positive as I can, it is a very difficult process. We completed an application, and I believe from the time we completed it to the time we got it was over a year, I believe. And that was with probably 2 emails a week for 12 months. I'm not exaggerating. So it is a challenge. And unfortunately, I think that is sadly part of why there is not a lot of providers, is because most people would have given up months ago. We did not, we stuck to it. But yes, it's a service you contract through HHSC. The initial part of the application is very straightforward. That's not where the hang up is. The hang up is once it gets to processing, it just sits for a long time on different people's desks. And there's just a lot. Honestly, the TWC contract process is far easier. And if any of you have been through that, you understand what that means. So and just keep that in mind. But yeah, you would contract through HHSC, and you would basically, as a provider of what they call employment assistance. And there's different ways and structures to employment assistance, but it's generally the categories of employment assistance through them. And then at that point, when you have that contract, what that would do is it would allow people to go to their service coordinator and add the service and you as the provider to their plan. And then that basically constitutes a referral, like TWC would send a referral.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. Our organization already provides behavioral, professional services. And so in that framework, we contract directly with the case managers, right? The service provision agencies that kind of
like
hold all of
the
those
authorities.
items.
Yeah, the
Sure.
LIDAs.
Yeah, well,
the
not
LIDAs,
state authorities, but like the service provision companies.
The local IDD authority. Yeah.
Well, and not even that, right? Like that's all the service coordinators, but I'm talking, so for our folks, if somebody has an IPC, it's written by their case manager, and then the service planning team includes the service coordinator, but the case manager is like the person from the agency, the service provision agency, not the local authority. So it's weird.
Yes.
It seems like a weird constellation. Might this be a managed care case? No, this is HCS. This is strictly
That's interesting.
Medicaid waiver, home and community services. So it sounds okay. So I have a follow-up question. So it sounds like it would not be easy to sort of jump from, oh, we offer these services, to the same kind of through the same kind of conduits. But James, has your organization found that providing services to HCS is fairly comparable to providing services through Texas Workforce Commission, in that Do they have published rates? Do they have very similar definitions of what those services entail?
They do, but it's a little tricky in how you have to do it. So, for example, with Texas Workforce Commission, every service has a rate, and sometimes there's a group rate and individual rate, right? Well, with HHSC, it's structured very differently in terms of how it's paid. The other challenge, and Ronnie Joe's putting us in there because she's my manager for she manages our HCS contract. So Ronnie Joe will tell you the rates are unfortunately very low. They're actually lower than TWC. They're $30 per hour. I will tell you the one, I don't want to say nice thing, the one positive thing about it though, is even though the rate is lower, generally speaking, they allow a lot more, they allow many more hours to be used. That's the best way to explain it. So it's like, so as a provider, even though we technically get paid less than we do for doing the same work with TWC, which is that fair? No, it's not, but that's a different conversation. It's not fair. At the same time, if we can provide a lot of hours, we can make it work. And so that's really what I will tell you. If you move through the process to get contracted, I would highly recommend, not just us, but talk to a provider who is doing the services. My Possibilities is a great one in Dallas that does that, but talk to somebody who's doing it and pick their brain if they're willing to, which most people like us are, to tell you how they're doing it. And that way you can structure it in a way that you can sustain as a provider. Because if you don't do that, you won't be able to serve very many people with it. And I know some providers that have tried and then said, well, nah, and they backed away and have said, no, I can't do it. But yes, it is structured differently. What Ronnie Joe put though is a really good point. There is no cap on hours. So for instance, if a service coordinator writes into a plan, I'm just gonna pick a random number out of my head, 180 hours of employment assistance, and they put it on that plan, then they can pay for 180 hours of employment assistance at $30 an hour. So it just kind of, yeah.
Do we know if that's in addition? Is that completely separate from their whole rest of their service cap?
It usually is, but that's also where you have to, and see, this is kind of the challenge with any HCS service, is it's very service coordinator dependent. So it really depends on the service coordinator to really write it out correctly. But yes, as Ronnie just said, it is a specific service. Employment assistance is itself and only itself, if that makes sense.
All right, awesome.
All right, well,
do you mind if, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, I think we're gonna move on, but Rachel, stick on, because James is going to celebrate after this, and I'm sure he'll answer any questions that you have.
Yeah.
We're
You can also email us too, or Ronnie Joe or I. We're happy to help.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, panelists. I'm going to have to end our panel portion of the event because we are right at 5 o'clock, and we have to get our call to action, and then I need to pop a bottle for our 1-year anniversary. So let's go ahead and move us to our call to action. So as we alluded to when you heard from the subject matter experts, is Texas has a lot of work to do. And in fact, we have like enormous work to do in terms of state funding. Out of 51 states, including Puerto Rico, we are 49th in the nation in terms of funding for employment services for people with disabilities. And prior to COVID, we were at a 94% unemployment rate for people with IDD in the state of Texas. And to give you some context, I moved here from Washington State 4 years ago, and 86% of people with IDD are employed in competitive integrated settings. So it's not that it can't happen, it's just we need to figure out how to make it happen here in Texas. And then also we talked a lot about state Medicaid today, and you as a service provider with TWC may have never heard of that before, but it really is the mechanism to which people with significant disabilities can go to work, maintain work, and even thrive or get promotions at work with advocacy and continued job coaching. And there's a 17+ year wait list for the Medicaid waiver. So when we talk about blending or braiding these funding streams with TWC and HHSC, that makes it really difficult when they don't even have their Medicaid waiver yet. So that was the woe is us portion. But what can you do about it? So we as Texas APSE put out a couple position papers, one specifically to Texas Workforce Commission, the VR services, and that's resulted in, like we celebrated earlier, a rate increase for providers across the state. They understand that provider capacity is such an issue, but we also talked about 6 other challenges within that position paper, and I believe Ronnie Jo is going to put that in the chat for you so that you can feel really well read when you're talking with your TWC counselors about how you can advocate for services and how it's supposed to work. HHSC, we also put out a position paper. We haven't had as much of a groundswell there in terms of advocacy efforts, but we're trying. And I think we've made some really wonderful connections as of recently to really advance that effort with HHSC. So if you want to know more about what we're doing and the points that we're bringing up with HHSC and how to improve employment for people with significant disabilities and specifically IDD across the state, feel free to also read our HHSC position paper. And then, like, it wouldn't be complete if we didn't have a quote, right? We need a quote so that we can leave NDEAM really happy and willing to work towards change. So we should all do something to right the wrongs that we see and not just complain about them. That's Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. And I will say that Texas APSE probably started with a lot of complaints because I needed a shoulder to cry on, and I needed other people to at least like acknowledge that there's some hurt there. But now we are like on a mission, and it's really fueled us, and COVID as well as fueled us. So now is the right time to join and really capitalize on our momentum. So how can you join and what can you do? And that is, you can join at apse.org. We have a variety of different membership rates. And in fact, we have a contest right now for a free membership. It's an essay contest. Depending on who you are, if you're a self-advocate or someone who works for an advocacy organization or a state employee, the prompt might look a little different, but it's basically what does employment first mean to you? So hopefully you took good notes and you can plagiarize James, Ashley, and Lauren from earlier today. But we have some wonderful committees. Once you're a member, you can join any one of these committees. You do not have to be a board member. And I'd encourage you to join the Public Policy Committee. If this discussion really got like flamed wind to your fire, helped fan the flames, whatever that term is, thank you. Join the Public Policy Committee, because that's where we talk about these discussions and we find out solutions and educate ourselves and other state specifically policy professionals to talk about employment first and how we're going to strategize to make it better. And so please join that committee. Communication. So if you are someone who likes social media, maybe is like a secret writer, like you wrote your newspaper in high school and you really wish you could do that. Well, we come out with a monthly, a quarterly publication newsletter that you can help write, or you can also help keep up with our social media. So we're very active on Facebook. We have our communications chair, Beth Palmer, with us. She's starting our Instagram to keep us hip and forward and all those things. But that's a really fun committee to join. We also have our membership committee. Joanna Burnett also joined us, and she is the chair of our membership committee. And that's a fun committee to join. And since we're past 5 o'clock, I'll just say this, that it's the committee that if you like to hang out on Zoom and with a cocktail and just try to make friends, then that's the committee for you to join. And it's really fun. We host membership events quarterly. And a lot of times there's an incentive of a free membership if you join those events. And then we have our professional development committee. So our professional development committee, headed by Ronnie Jo Frazier and Lucy Gafford, who are on today, made this happen today. So in partnership with UNTY's Texas APSE, had this presentation, and I hope that you gained something from it. If not, if you are looking for more, please go to UNTY's course catalog, and you will see that there's a Employment First in Texas brief presentation that I put on, and Liana helped to provide interpreting services, so fully accessible for anyone who would like to get some more UNT-wise CEUs for free. Now that leads us to just a really brief, fun thank you. So first I want to thank our wonderful panelists because they did an excellent job, and I wish I could just be a fly on their wall in their offices and just hear their conversations all day long, because they just do fabulous work across the state. And thank you so much for everyone for coming. I hope that it was helpful. If you complete the survey, you'll get your CEUs. I would love your feedback. I know that I probably came off as this, bumbling, like too energetic person, because I'm not a professional moderator, but what I'm really good at is just having fun and socializing and talking about employment first, because that's what gets me all jazzed. But feel free to provide any feedback that you have. Also, if you want to stick around, we're going to have an after party, woo woo, because we're celebrating our first anniversary. And so that's for anyone, whether you're a member or not. You can get to know us a little bit better, see us in our natural state, which is Zoom and talking employment first with a cocktail. So absolutely. And you do not have to drink in order to participate. And then you can like us on Facebook. A lot of our information that we put out on in the newsletter, a lot of our updates about what we're working on are all put out on Facebook. And then there's also some email addresses. So the Texas APSE email address that goes to myself, and then the apse.tx.ppc@gmail, that goes directly to Lauren Gerkin, because that's the public policy committee's email. So specifically, if you have questions about like, how can I, get some change? Well, there you go. You can email Lauren and she'll get you connected. So that is all we have for today. Thank you so much, UNT-wise, for hosting this wonderful event and drawing these faces that mostly are off camera, but I know are intently listening and hopefully smiling at this point, and will stick on and join us for a fabulous celebration.